Welcome back to the Way of the Wandering Wizard. I am Robert Andrew Meredith Kennedy, and I am a pure and open channel for the very finest vibrations of divine love and light, made manifest here in service to Gaia and those who travel with her. In yesterday's little video, my retelling of my hip operation was beautifully sound affected by the neighbours. The joys of living in a henge as a wizard, obviously, is this time of year when the clocks change, everybody has to cut stone in order to lose that hour. It's a complicated process, people. But neighbourhood DIY aside, I was sharing my story of my time recovering in hospital. I'd just been through 2 big operations. My hip operation was a great success. I have a fantastic little ring of metal still in my hip, which I will carry until my passing. Basically keeps the top of my leg into my bottom. It's not the most comfortable thing to sit on, which is why you'll see the Way of the Wandering Wizard is often slightly lopsided. But I digress. The next big job, after the hip was repaired, was basically to repair that hole. And when the car had hit me, basically it had driven my leg into the air, or the air intake of my bike, and I'd left 5 centimetre or so size hole in my leg, where basically where the impact had been. Clearly that's never going to heal up. There's no skin there to stretch back over it, so it had to come from somewhere. Now, again, divine providence, soul planning, luck of the Kennedys. We live 20 miles from East Grinstead, which is the original centre for plastic surgery. They perfected their art, sadly, through the burn victims from World War II, crash fighter pilots, returning soldiers. All of that work was pioneered at East Grinstead, and their work continues. And I have to say, their work is fine as ever, as many of my friends will attest. Not just me, folks. The joys of my life is that many of my friends have been through traumas which make mine seem mild in comparison. So it's not just me, it is us. Anyway, the wonderful surgeon from East Grinstead came over for his consultation and delicately explained he would be applying something like a high-tech cheese grater to my leg, where he would be lifting layers of skin, going down, turn them round, and then lay them back on the hole, where they would heal into the skin as it was a donor from donor to donor site on my body, and that would seal the hole, which would allow my leg to go on healing underneath. It sounded quite simple. I was given a day or so to rest, and I was warned that as I was on a driver, I would be needing that when I woke up. Being the hero that I am, my brain's thinking, yeah, I've been hit by a car, leg's been smashed to pieces, things have been screwed into it, and all the rest of it, bit of skin, that's not going to hurt much, is it? How wrong was I? The operation went ahead. A usual journey through the hospital with the great porters, laughing and joking as we often did, arriving to what was now becoming a sea of familiar faces in the operating theatre, and the usual comments of, "Oh Bob, you're back cashing in your regular flyer miles," or words to that effect. It helps, obviously, having my brother being a member of staff, but I have to say that that level of care really helped me personally to get through the trauma. I'd very much phrased it in a way of these were physical challenges. I'd had a lot of experience of this kind of thing, and that's how I was seeing it. Each operation was a step closer to the door, getting back home. The family that I'd just chosen, decided, couldn't bear to leave. So I awoke, having decided not to have skin taken from either my right leg, which had been battered enough and was quite bruised, my butt cheeks, which basically had been down the road and had got a little warm, the only viable option was my right leg. So I woke from my operation with the standard dull thuds and aches and pains from the right hand side of my body, and quite literally the worst case of gravel rash that I've ever experienced, obviously, from the donor site. And as explained, it's often the case, the donor sites really hurt. Knew it was an undamaged piece of body, and it stung. So making good use of the driver over the next few days, with lots of help from the specialists. They came over every day of how to treat the wounds, wound maintenance. Strangely, quite a lot of washing and removal of scar from the donor site as it regrew skin. And it was the incredible process of the body. Really, within a few days, it started to heal. It was a lot less sore. I'm left with a neat white scar on that side of my leg, a little reminder of the transfers that have been made to balance me up. But a successful operation. Now, inevitably, big roadside traumas, big incidents like this take priority over an already stretched NHS. Everybody slides around on the lists. I'd never really worked out before. I've had operations where I've been ready to go and then rather disappointed because I've been put back. It's never really explained to me that it's cases like mine and others that are far worse that push us back down the list. Having a brother online to explain that process helped. And so, quite rightly, as my foot was considered to be really the last of the jobs, I slid on the priority list and my ops were put back by a few days. And that gave me time to lie around in bed and start to make sense, I suppose, of my outer body and really who I was. In that trauma of the incident, as I tried to explain, really, my sense of self became so absolutely focused on what I needed to survive and then to basically drift through a series of operations. I spent most of that time, when I really think about it, anaesthetized. I was out of my body more than I was in, as I was drifting in and out. When I did come back in, clearly on that amount of pain relief, a lot of what I was saying, that may have sense to me, came out as somewhat garbled. Insights, wailings, ego outbursts as the inevitable side of us that feels a little battered needs to have its say. I can definitely remember lying there at times with nobody's experienced pain like this. That was selfish of me. There are many that have experienced far more than that, but in that moment that's how it felt to me. Probably the greatest misunderstanding of the time between my mum and I was, I believe my statement was something like, at no time since Jesus was on the cross has everybody ever experienced pain like this, or pain like that on the road. Egotistical of me. I mean, seriously, being hit by a car in comparison to crucifixion, it doesn't even bear thinking about. But that's how egos feel in trauma. It is intense. You do feel cut off, do feel isolated. The pain becomes the focus of life. And I was having to deal with, having gone from that point to what would hopefully be leaving the hospital as soon as the next series of operations were done. Things started to calm down then, that intensity of the post-traumatic. The one joy I had, I suppose, or the advantage I had, both at the accident and while I was in recovery, is that I had spent years meditating, being a hippie. All of that mindfulness, all of those focuses was something that I could actually bring to bear while I was lying in hospital. My understanding that the mind, which given my experience on the road was now very, very separate. You'll notice, I probably haven't played back one of my little videoettes, I often refer to the leg, the foot, the hip, not my leg, my foot, my hip. Now, is that a deep psychological protective mechanism of body disassociation that many people in PTSD have? Could be. Could be. An innate understanding of having had that out of body experience, that my mind and my body, while working together, are not one and the same thing. One doesn't produce the other doesn't produce one. That it's an interplay between two pairs of an experience. Probably, but that's quite a wordy and wizardly way of looking at things. It certainly changes your outlook on life, and lying in hospital bed, I got a chance to look at that. And I also got a chance to reflect on the experiences, things that had happened in my past, even in this life, that had helped me maintain a sense of presence, a sense of calmness, a sense of how to survive on the accident, how to rein in those primal parts of us that will generally lash out, to lock that down and use that energy to maintain myself for 45 minutes with a big hole in my leg. I have to say, there is a part of me then, and there's a big part of me now that still looks and goes, yeah, that's pretty good. That's impressive. The fact that I knew that I'd signed up for it, so therefore had the ability, does that negate it slightly? No. Like many great ideas, as I drifted a little into my soul journey, an idea of how close one could get and the actual living of it are very different things. And there are still parts of me that look at myself and think, when I said I'll go back, but all this shit has to get sorted out, thinks you did a proper job on yourself. But that's the joys of the way of the wandering wizard. Like all of us, we hide ourselves from ourselves, and we slowly discover ourselves as we journey onwards. I have to say, from where I'm sitting today, from where I was sitting then, as hard as it's been a worthy journey. It's been a worthy journey. And at this point, I should point out, the person describing these events now is a very changed person from the person that lived them. Did I have this level of insight, this level of understanding of myself when I was lying in hospital? But of course I didn't. Part of me did. I was trying to communicate. You ask my friends, I was phoning them up at all times of the night as soon as I got a phone back, gibbering. It's taken me 9 years to make sense of a lot of those gibberings, and I hope that by sharing these with you now, they make a little more sense. If nothing more, they'll be a useful aid memoir to those who remembered me when I was ranting and raving in a hospital bed at times. Clearly, wizards don't just arrive at accidents, fully formed, fully fledged. Although, like many people who've been through trauma, my life is very much divided. There is me post 2012, the person speaking to you, and there is the person that lived those experiences up until that accident. It marks a complete step change from how life was to how my life's been. It can't, but that's in common with anybody. Any human being that's been through any degree of trauma, anywhere where we've been truly threatened, or we have seen those around us threatened with a loss of life or intense pain, it affects us as humans. It has to. And it changes us. How it changes us is our choice. I chose to make the lightest of it, the best of it, to understand where those challenges came from. And I was blessed in the fact that I had, in my experience, the challenge of a lifetime and a chance to prove myself for who I was. point. It's when all wizards start to disappear up their own flues. Thank you for bearing with me.